Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Raised by Curiosity podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Estep, and today we are going to be talking all things why I love listening to podcasts so much, and I'm so vehement that other people do it as well. And I'll use podcast as a loose term, but I will say listening to conversations that are more educational content based. If you remove yourself from the statement that is, oh, I just learn a lot by listening to podcasts, and you allow yourself to go a little deeper into it, I want you to realize that podcasting is a safe space for you to have conversations and debates within yourself because you're doing it subconsciously. You're having these conversations within your own mind, within your own thoughts, but you're also having these conversations in your mind with past versions of yourself. So when you're listening to a plethora of genres of podcasting, for example, you are healing all past versions of you, or you are shedding light on past, present, and future versions of yourself. You could be healing the 6-year-old inner child that is in you. You could be healing the 16-year-old pissed off teenager inside you. You could be healing the present 35, 50, 60-year-old person you are right now, or your future self and the goals you want to strive towards, the ambitions you want to strive towards, or how habits and personal decisions you make on a daily basis affect what your life could look like 5, 10, 15 years from now. The options are endless, but also because you are training your mind to play devil's advocate. Every single time you're listening to one of these conversations, you're hearing both sides of the spectrum. You're hearing, for example, if it's two people sitting having a conversation, you're hearing both sides of an argument. If there's maybe 5, 6, 7 people, you're understanding all the different points of view, where everyone is coming from, and without realizing it, again, you're doing a lot of things subconsciously without even realizing it, and it's just ingrained in you and has probably been instilled in you since you were old enough to understand and absorb information from what is going on around you. You are making judgments, you are making assumptions, you are learning and absorbing information based off of what you see. So you see how someone is dressed, you're going to make a judgment based on that. How someone articulates their words, you're going to make a judgment on that. How someone combs their hair, or if they decide to brush their hair, maybe if they decide to put makeup on their face or not, how they dress, what their style is, if they have a specific dialect, how they use the words, how sophisticated their vocabulary is. All of this stuff plays into how you judge a person, whether you're listening to them or watching them. Again, you could be listening to a podcast on a walk or driving in your car, or you could be sitting down watching a video of these podcasts, these YouTube videos, whatever you're watching, whatever conversation form, media, I should say, you're watching. You are making assumptions without realizing it because we have been ingrained and it has been instilled in us since we were very young to be a data analyst. But that is probably a conversation that I will save for another time. Let's focus back to the conversation side of things. Once again, you are playing devil's advocate. You are understanding one or more different points of view from where a person is coming from, what their stance is, where they received their information from. I hope you all are asking yourself those questions, but you're challenging your own brain to understand their point of view and where they're coming from, why they think those things, why they're saying those things, why they have that stance on a specific issue. You then ask yourself, oh, is it because of their past, their present, or their future? Is it because of how they grew up? Is it because of finances? Is it because of their schooling or their level of schooling? Could it be present and absent parents or siblings? Could it be because of grief, heartbreak, loss? Is there addiction in the family? All of these play a role. And while you're actively listening to these podcasts and these conversations happening, you're absorbing all this information and flushing through all of those thoughts separately within milliseconds. Again, this is why the brain is genuinely one of the probably is the most beautiful organ in the human body, human anatomy, in my opinion, because I could talk about this all day, but okay, hold on. Let's dial back and let me kind of piece this together so it makes a little more sense. Okay, to make sure that I got all of them in, and I hope you don't mind me looking at my computer for a second, but again, I don't want to miss anything because every single one of these is just as important. I wrote down all of the skill sets that will be sharpened and enhanced by you listening to conversations that are educational based or not, but for today's conversation, let's choose educational content. You are enhancing your emotional intelligence, your regular intelligence, perception versus perspective. That's a really big one. I'll touch on that again. Culture, politics, economics, religion, sociology, philosophy, and finishing off with vocabulary, articulation, pronunciation. You're absorbing and understanding and downloading all of this information when you're listening to a separate conversation without even realizing it. Your brain is completely doing it subconsciously and just running on a back burner on a stove. Think about how beautiful that is for a second and give yourself kudos. Because even if you don't feel productive when you're listening to something, you are. But again, there are better ways to enhance these specific skill sets, and that's what we're going to dive into today. All right, let's backpedal for a second. We have vocabulary, articulation, and punctuation. I've already discussed this in a past one of my episodes on building your intellectual curiosity and why you stopped asking stupid questions, or dumb questions is what I called it. Either way, if you haven't listened to that one, go listen to that one. There's a lot of really good, juicy information in there. But going off of podcasting, or rather listen to other people's conversations, you are actively building your vocabulary, your articulation, your pronunciation, your punctuation, when to take pauses, people, okay? I don't know when we lost the art of that. Everyone nowadays is typing without punctuation and using lowercase on everything. It's genuinely a very big pet peeve of mine, but I won't dive into that. When you are listening to these conversations, every single time that you hear and recognize a word that you don't know, write it down. Take a moment to look up that word, have it play out on your phone or whatever device you're using. Listen to the pronunciation of that word, because tones over certain vowels are going to mean different things and you're going to pronounce them differently. Also, if it comes from different cultures, for example, if it is a French word that we use in the English language that we picked up, okay, because that's a important differentiation. Look up the definition of the word and then try to use it in a sentence not similar to the sentences that are already listed on whatever site you're using. I recommend Oxford Dictionary. My second best is going to be Merriam-Webster. I always get that wrong. But yes, challenge yourself to learn new words every single time that you hear them. This is how you're going to grow your vocabulary, your articulation, and punctuation. Next, we have psychology and sociology. I'm going to tie the two together. As we know, psychology is the study of the human mind, how it functions, why it functions the way that it does. And sociology is the study of the functioning of a human society and human development. Whether you are listening to a podcast specifically on human sociology or human psychology and the study or the anatomy of the brain, when you're listening to these conversations, all of those are still true. You are still actively learning human psychology and human sociology because of how people speak, what they speak on, what their opinions and beliefs and morals and values are on, the stances they take on certain topics, their body language and how they choose to present themselves, again, if you're watching it versus just listening to it. Pick up on small social cues, because it will not only help you to be an intellectual, but I promise you it will help you in your conversations, and it will help with your small talk. It will help you understand how humans work, how we're wired, how we all somehow do things differently on a daily basis, because we are all unique, but we also all have a basic DNA code that follows certain structures, which I will get into. Okay, backpedaling again. We're going to cluster these together, just like I did the last two, which this is going to be a little repetitive in this section, but bear with me. So religion, economics, politics, and culture. You will learn all of these, again, by watching how people interact, by watching body language, understanding different people's points of view and where they come from based on their background, their present self, and where they want their future self to go. Obviously, you are going to learn more topics about culture and religion if you are listening to a specific conversation surrounding those topics. If you were listening to a conversation from a Buddha, for example, or if you were to listen to a conversation from a Catholic priest, obviously those are first primary sources because you are going directly to the source to find out that information. But you also then have underlying levels. Again, think of it to layers to an onion, or different layers of the earth, however you would like to visualize it to suit your fancy, to help build a picture in your brain. People will have different opinions and different beliefs in these conversations based off of how they grew up. So if they grew up under a specific level of religion and then maybe changed and they converted to something else, or they became atheist or were atheist and then converted into a different religion, those all tie into that person's identity. So does their culture and their traditions that they grew up with within their family, or that they figured out by themselves and enhanced by themselves. Now diving into the deep end and away from facts and more into my opinion on the topic. True intellectuals will hear and see all sides of an argument. They will play devil's advocate. They will try to hear and understand everyone else's point of view before they just smack their opinion down on the table and refuse to have any kind of open-mindedness. Again, going back to building your curiosity, which I have an entire separate podcast on. If you guys haven't listened to it, please go listen to it. There's a lot of really juicy material in that one. But a quote that I heard one time that will always stick with me, and I can't remember if I learned it in high school or college, but the quote is, "Your lack of curiosity about the world around you is really just an extension of your narcissism." When you choose not to learn about different cultures, different traditions, languages, economies, political structures, currencies, you are choosing the path of narcissism. You become not only an intellectual, but someone worth having a conversation with when you broaden your scope and your knowledge and your basic understanding of topics around you, because these are topics that are going to come up in conversation at a dinner table, maybe at a job interview, on a date, meeting new friends, joining a different friend group, topics that you will be actively voting on, specifically my friends that live in America, because we live in a democracy where you have the luxury to help vote on these items. When you are actively choosing not to broaden your scope and understand these basic levels of intellectual topics, you are choosing ignorance, you are choosing narcissism, and people will not want to have a conversation with you because 9 times out of 10, those are the people that shut down after someone shuts down their opinion and they don't want to hear anything. There's no open-mindedness. There's a complete lack of self-awareness, a full span of ignorance, and I can guarantee you that they probably don't have very many friends and they are not good at conversations. So again, and I'm probably not the only one that thinks this way. When I'm having a conversation with someone and I see their inability to share an opinion or belief with anyone else besides their own opinion or belief, and their absolute closed-mindedness, I associate it with a lack of intelligence. And again, this could happen to you on a daily basis more than you realize. It could have happened to you at a job interview. It could have happened to you on a date, meeting new friends, joining a new friend group, making comments on social media. I'm going to say that louder for the people in the back. Making comments on social media. I'm looking at you, my little keyboard ninjas. But you probably won't even end up finding this podcast episode because you just don't care. Anyway, I want you to learn to challenge ideas, especially your own ideas. Also because this is a way that you are going to find yourself, your morals, your values, what you do stand for and what you don't stand for. Instead of just copy and pasting ideals that you see on the internet from a random celebrity or random influencer who you don't know and probably have a parasocial relationship with because you think that you do know them. So yes, challenge these ideas. Allow yourself to challenge them over and over again. Every single time that you have a thought on, oh, I agree with what they said, or I disagree with what they said, challenge it. See why. If you already are agreeing or disagreeing with what someone said, ask yourself 100 questions on why you made that assumption, why you have that question, and why you have that political, economical, traditional, conservative, radical belief. Ask yourself why. Pick it apart. I promise you this is going to be one of the many ways for you to find out who you are. You need to start by asking yourself 100 questions. And what better way to do that is to listen to other people's conversations and find your own opinion in those topics. It isn't the only way, but it is a good way to practice it. And this is another problem that I have with people who only believe things and take things at face value, i.e. also people who are probably doom scrolling and not creating a single coherent, independent thought of their own. They think that everything that they see online is true. Or again, when I say that they're taking something at face value, they're not allowing themselves to activate the learning centers in their brain to understand why that video is what they saw. People who are seeing videos that are obviously AI and believing it at face value and not taking a second or two to critically think and problem solve that it could be AI, that it could be fake, that someone could be lying. For example, just because someone creates a TikTok page and is wearing a stethoscope around their neck and maybe wearing scrubs, that doesn't mean you should automatically assume that that person is a doctor, because costumes exist and you can buy scrubs on Amazon for $27. You can buy a stethoscope on Amazon for $12 if you want it to be a piece of costume jewelry, or more expensive if you want it to be a real one. Regardless, don't take everything at face value. Another reason why I love listening to podcast conversations. Understand the difference between who's an expert and who is just a host, or who is the one asking the questions if it's not the host. For example, a lot of people will come for me on my specific list of recommendations that I have for podcasts. And again, the people that are coming for me, again, are probably just keyboard ninjas that don't ever leave their house or stimulate any kind of educational content throughout their day. But regardless, they will look at my list of recommendations and say, Morgan, a lot of those podcast recommendations you have, those hosts aren't experts in anything. And I understand that point of view. Again, this is where open-mindedness comes in, people. Understand that the podcast hosts themselves may not be an expert in a specific area. For example, a lot of people will say this about Mel Robbins. A lot of people will say this about Stephen Bartlett or Chris Williamson. My point of view when I come to look at these conversations and the discussion and awareness that I bring to the table when I do have these conversations with friends, family members, or in my comment sections on my videos, is to retract the idea from, or I guess surrounding the lack of expert knowledge, and more who they're hosting on those episodes. What is the person, or who is the person they're bringing in? What does their background look like? What does their credibility look like? What is the foundation of beliefs and evidence they have stacked against them or with them to show they are who they say they are and the job title that they have earned? So when they have cancer doctors on these podcast episodes, or they have relationship and life coaches, those are going to be two very different levels of expert, but there are still experts in their own areas. When you are watching and listening to a podcast host ask their guest questions, reflect on it. Ask yourself, would I have asked that question differently? Or do I agree with that question? Was that a good question? How is the expert sitting across from them, next to them, or on Zoom with them, answering those questions, and why do they think the way that they do? Again, activate your learning center, activate your critical thinking and your problem solving skills, because the anti-brain rot that is fluctuating around the internet right now, if we do not try to face this problem head on, it is going to beat us in a matter of years. And we are actively deteriorating our skill sets thanks to these little devices, thanks to AI, because everything is making, or rather everything around us looks like it's becoming easier. And every single time we as a society make something look easier, we're actively becoming dumber. Again, we need to face this problem head on. Because when you're looking for these simple forms of release, the easy button, if you will, you are actively looking for artificial forms of dopamine instead of natural forms of dopamine. So again, don't take everything at face value. Don't take everything you read and see online at face value. Don't believe the first thing you see or the first thing you hear. Allow yourself and do yourself the justice, please, of looking up your questions. Stay curious. Keep building your intellectual curiosity. So again, to close this off, when you are listening to other people's conversations and you are playing devil's advocate, as well as building your own foundation on your belief systems, building your opinions, your morals, your values, you're shaping yourself as a person and trying to find out who you are also building the skill sets around emotional intelligence, perception versus perspective. Again, putting yourself in your shoes versus someone else's shoes. Culture, politics, economics, religion, sociology, philosophy, vocabulary, articulation, and punctuation. You're building all of these skill sets without even realizing it, guys. Your brain is completely doing this subconsciously, but the more that you allow yourself to be aware of it, and you can really sharpen those skills instead of just having them being, imagine it being dull pencils in a box, and you don't have a sharpener in your bag. Or you have a sharpener in your bag and you're choosing not to use it. Yeah, are the pencils still going to work and they're still going to make marks on paper? Sure, they're not going to last very long. When you sharpen all of these skills and you allow yourself to play both sides of an argument, understand both sides of an argument, you become a well-rounded individual. You become someone who is an active listener, someone people enjoy having conversations with. You can have intellectual conversations on a date, at a job interview, making new friends. It helps you find yourself, your values, your political beliefs, where you stand and where our economy is today. Just researching skills. Think of how many people do not have that skill in the tech-driven, AI-driven world that we have today. Because a lot of times people are going to do their research and they are just going to read the Google Gemini overview on the internet instead of doing their own research, clicking on the second page of Google, using Google Scholar, going back to libraries, use a library card, knowing the difference between a primary source, a secondary source, and a tertiary source, reading through news articles, that's another good one, separating different levels on the political spectrum that are these news outlets. Who are they owned by? Where is the information coming from? How is a headline phrased and why is it phrased that way due to the political beliefs surrounding who owns that societal network? Again, all of this plays into it, ladies and gentlemen. Not to mention, going back to the easy button, when you're listening to all these different experts and you're listening to 30, 40 minute, an hour to an hour and a half to 2 hour conversations from experts, you're gaining this much knowledge in this short period of time. Imagine how drastic your opinions and your knowledge basis would grow a year from now if you simply listen to one singular educational content or podcast a day. Or start small, every other day, 3 times a week. You will be 1% better every single day, every single time that you try. So this year, I challenge you to swap the bad for the good habits. If you are doom scrolling, I want you to look at that doom scrolling maybe yesterday. So say you were on your phone for 3 hours. I want you to spend 3 hours learning today. Obviously, you are going to be coming at me and saying, Morgan, I have a job. I have kids. I don't have the time to do that. Show me your screen time. Show me your screen time. If you have 3 hours on TikTok, you do have the time in the day. You're just being ignorant and not honest with yourself. And if you don't want to grow and be better, that's fine. But you wouldn't have clicked on this episode in this specific podcast if you thought that way. Because a small portion of you really wants it to come true. You do want to become better. It just takes the first step. I recently watched an interview with James Clear, who is the author behind Atomic Habits. If you have not read that book, I don't know what you're doing. It will change your life one page at a time. Annotate that book. I've read it 3 different times, and every single time I read it, I find something new that enhances a new skill set. But in that episode that I watched yesterday with James Clear and Mel Robbins on the Mel Robbins podcast, it's 90 minutes. I highly recommend everybody go watch it. He was discussing the habit behind someone trying to get themselves to the gym and how the heaviest weight that you will use on that day is opening the gym door. Because it's true. The hardest and heaviest step is always going to be the first step. Because once you get the ball rolling, thanks to friction, thanks to tension, thank you physics, once you get the ball rolling, everything is easy from then on. Whether it's on a flat surface, whether it's on a tilted surface, whether it's on rolling hills, again, physics. Once you get the ball rolling and you start a habit, it becomes easier to stick because it's already in motion. Objects in motion stay in motion. Thank you, inertia. So yes, I challenge you to listen to more educational content, whether it's a podcast every day, every other day, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. You could start a habit by saying every time I get in my car, instead of listening to music, I'm going to listen to an educational podcast. If I'm going on a walk, instead of listening to music or an audiobook, unless it's an educational book, I'm going to listen to an educational podcast. Baby steps. Baby steps. This isn't something you can jump into overnight. This is going to take time because, again, they are time. But if you are someone that wants to improve your intellectual literacy, your media literacy, your personal development skills, this is a great way to start. Also reading books, but I'll talk about that in a separate episode. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you for listening or watching, whatever you are listening to this to. If you're driving in the car, drive safe and get to your destination safely. If you are watching this, thanks for sitting down with me. And we have a nice little community growing here. I'm actually very excited about it. I appreciate every single one of you. So with that being said, and our community growing more and more every single day, if you have any podcast recommendations or YouTube channel recommendations or book recommendations, please leave them below because we should be sharing the wealth. There's absolutely no gatekeeping here. I don't believe in gatekeeping. If I see something that I think is worthy to share to the community that will benefit everyone else as much as it has benefited me, I'm going to share it. So don't hold back, guys. Favorite books, movies, TV shows, documentaries, whatever it may be, share it. Share the wealth because knowledge is wealth and wealth is power. And what is power without psychology? My goodness, I could talk about that another time and will. So stay tuned. So from an older sister to a younger brother or younger sister, whoever is watching this, I hope you have a great rest of your week. I love you. Stay vigilant. Stay building your intellectual curiosity. And I will see you next week on another episode. Love you guys.